Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back. And Julie Harris, it is October the 12th.
Yes, indeed. Mid-October, and it is Tuesday.
So I have a confession for you.
What's that?
I'm still recovering from last week.
Oh, me too. What an event, right?
We were in Miami. Some of you came to visit us. There were 300 people in the room. It was a C5 event, which is a Hispanic organization that's the best described as something that is extraordinary. And if you're in and around Miami or really anywhere in the world and you're a Hispanic real estate professional, whereas in Spanish is your prominent and preferred language, you got to be looking into C5 because it's like nothing I've ever experienced before.
I totally could not agree with you more.
And the energy and enthusiasm was, I've never been in a real estate event where you had to tell people to cut back on the energy and enthusiasm.
Seriously, that is what it was like 100% of the time, all 3 days.
Yeah, they would get up and dance for no particular reason. Of course, it was all in Spanish, right? So we don't know. Maybe there was a really good reason to get up and dance.
Well, I got about 50% of it. They were mostly celebrating success at different levels and people's accomplishments, and I thought that was fantastic. But man, did they like to celebrate?
Yeah, at lunch, we put a video. You guys got to see this. It's just hilarious. At lunch, they have lunch. Then, of course, guess what they like to do? They like to party. So they're having a dance in the room, and there's music playing, and it was like celebratory. Let's just say it that way. But someone took a video of Julie and I just standing there, and we look like, I don't know, two people that are trying to stand upright like during a real ferocious tsunami or something. Because we're just around this sort of storm of humanity, all dancing and just, to this music that, of course, we didn't understand. Well, you probably did.
Some of it.
But anyway.
What a fantastic event. It was also largely educational.
It was. That's what it was based on. It's called C5 because each C stands for something, and the first one is coaching. But you definitely want to check that out, especially, again, if you're Hispanic. And it was provided by the Montiel organization. For all of you who've met for the first time at that event, it was a real pleasure and honor to meet you. And thank you for inviting us. And we look forward to seeing you again in April because guess what? We're seeing all of you in Miami again in April as well. So moving forward, we're going to be talking about something this week that is something that I think a lot of you, obviously all of you are going to be aware of this, but not a lot of you necessarily understand it. And it really is what social media should be and shouldn't be in your business. And the social media, obviously, all this is one of the biggest, most popular conversations in the real estate halls of education. Everyone likes to talk about it as some sort of replacement for real communication. Everyone likes to talk about it as some sort of, or at least present it to you as some sort of silver bullet to doing the real work of real estate. And what we're going to do today, and what we're going to do this week, is we're going to position social media in such a way that you'll understand what it is as a practical tool, and then you decide whether or not you actually want to use it. Because unlike, for example, proactive lead generation, social media really is optional, at least if you're going to engage at the highest level. So social media is something that we obviously have been participating in it in a long time. We had I think a Facebook Generation 1 Facebook page. Julie and I signed up for Twitter like 3 days after they started issuing public accounts. timandjulieharris.com, our URL. I think we bought that in 1997 or 96 maybe even when they first started selling public URLs. So we've been into internet marketing and lead generation, social networking, and all this stuff since its onset. But we never saw it for what a lot of people hoped it would be, which is, again, a replacement for the real work of real estate. What Julie and I are going to be doing this week is we're going to go through this methodically, and we're going to explain to you in maybe more detail than you want to have, but you need to have this information so, again, you can make an educated decision on what you want to be doing with this information, social media on a whole. And you, again, decide at what level you want to engage or if you want to engage at all. So, Julie, when you were putting these notes together,
yes,
and we worked on this together a lot for the last 2 or 3 days, what was the dominant takeaway you had? And again, and then we'll get to part one. But what was the dominant takeaway you had, just so we can sort of condition these guys to what to expect?
Question. I think that my dominant thought was that you can go really surface on it and kind of do what most people do, I think, and just post now and then when you think about it, the content that you think about at the time you think about it. Or you can really study it and drill down and do a deep dive into getting more out of that if possible. But that's it, that's not something that you can just really throw together. This has become the management of social media, whether you do it yourself. I have a second title to this, which is, what does a social media manager do anyway, right? That's a job if you want to really deep dive and systematize it. So you can stay a surface or you can deep dive as much as you want to, but I think there's a lot to it. I think it's something to be studied and polished.
So you can take social media based on what you just said. You can look at it as we were when we were flying to Miami, right? And we were in seats 1A and 1B or 2A and 2B or whatever it was. And sitting right next to us was Logan Paul.
Right.
And Logan Paul is this huge social media influencer. He was the guy that recently fought Floyd Mayweather. But prior to that, I'm about to sneeze. Prior to that, he was a big social media influencer.
Bless you.
Bless me. And he, it was funny to see him sitting next to us in on the plane, because he has made his oaths being a social media megastar, basically.
For sure.
And anyone who's younger than us, frankly, probably anyone that's younger than us minus about 10 years,
yeah.
knows who Logan Paul and his brother are.
You guys can look him up online.
You guys can look him up. And then across the street from us, we just discovered that, this was kind of funny, that the, what were they?
Bachelor and Bachelorette?
Bachelor and Bachelorette. I don't remember their names. Yeah, we've met them a bunch of times. We didn't know who they were, and our neighbor told us that they're the Bachelor and Bachelorette.
We just thought they were oddly good-looking humans.
Yeah, oddly, exactly.
Like, who are they?
Kind of unnecessarily attractive people, and we saw them walking around. But when our neighbor told us who they were, we looked them up, and of course, they're really all over social media. And after their show, so here's what we're trying to say. There are, to Julie's point, there are extremes in which you can take this. You can go where you're just creating, and again, we're going to get into the weeds on this. You don't need to be intimidated by what we're saying, because we're going to give you a pathway forward. And the pathway is to A, not do anything with it. That is an option. Pathway B is do very, very little with it, where you just have like a Facebook business page and you have a basic profile on Instagram, and really all you're doing is building your profiles on all these social networking platforms so that you're searchable. And I think option C, there's probably something in between B and C, but option C is if you just decide to go all out and be some sort of social media superstar, which really is we know other people too that live here.
Tons. Yeah.
That basically make a lot of money from social media. YouTubers
even
and
kids that are
Jay House, Jeremy and his family, they live nearby. We see them practically every day. There's this other family, and trust me, guys, we live in a weird area of Puerto Rico. But there's this other family that ninja kids, right?
I know. So he just really those are like her idols.
Yeah, but it's so hilarious. There's this family. How many kids is it? 5?
I think there's 5.
Right. This family of 5 kids, and their parents videotape them, and they've got this whole channel. Just Google it. Go on YouTube and watch Ninja Kids. Well, I wouldn't necessarily watch it if you don't want to lose some IQ points, but know that it's there, and they're making
it's a thing.
They're making lots of money because they get a lot of people watching. There's kids, that are Zoe's age that watch it just like we used to watch, the Cosby Show, right? And so that's really the other end of the spectrum. So somewhere in there, to nothing to you wanting to be an all-out social media superstar. That's really the broad swath of different pathways you can adopt going forward. And we're going to give you some rules. We're going to tell you some things that you shouldn't do, things you should do. And so get ready to take some notes. This is going to be a very in-depth, deep dive into social media and really a practical, tactical approach, which I think all of you have come to expect from us.
That's right. So this is largely to expose you to all of the different bits and pieces, what it is, how it works, and to kind of hit it middle of the road. We're not having a podcast about how to turn you into a YouTuber or anything like that. This is more for the use of your business purposes. So how to manage your social media. And, if you do choose to hire a social media manager, what would you even hold them accountable to? So what are the pieces and parts that have to work together for a successful media presence? We're going to split this out day by day with different themes. Today is part 1, communication. So point A, communication is key. This is what social media actually is. It's an additional way to communicate with your friends, your center of influence, your prospects, clients, and professional relationships. You should personally be efficient and professional at communicating effectively with all of these different types of people, all these different categories. Now, if you hire somebody else, you'll have to ensure that they can do this for you and do it in a way that's appropriate to who you are.
So let's put that first point in context. Social media is in between mass media, sort of traditional media, and direct communication. So you got proactive direct communication. Let's call that picking up the phone, making calls, meeting people in real life, things like that. So it's real direct, hello, how do you do conversations. And then you have mass media, which is taking out ads. Social media is somewhere in between. Because what social media is doing is, if you do it effectively, it does provide similar advantages of both of mass media, because, again, you can have a mass exposure, and direct communication. It's not as effective as mass media, and it's nowhere near as effective as direct communication. Mm-hmm. So if you're listening to this topic and you're already feeling overwhelmed, as some of you will, just the very topic or the very thought of having, Tim and Julie tell you should pursue this, understand that if you have to choose to be really good at one thing, it's going to be the direct communication. Because at the end of the day, that is and always will be the most effective way to get business and, build any sort of sustainable real estate practice.
Yes, and interestingly, while I was doing this research, I came across several articles, some of them Psychology Today, Discover Magazine, just various different resources. And they were all stating that there is a noticeable degradation in people's ability to speak in person. And they were, many of them, blaming lockdown and COVID and things like that. And that people are actually studying the change in communication style after COVID. And I also am working on, after this podcast week, I'm working on an article related to that. I'm sorry, a podcast related to that, which is all about post-COVID manners, because all of that has changed and people are studying that as well. Like, is it appropriate to ask if somebody has vaccine or not? And what's the appropriate handshake? And all these things that have changed, but one of them is communication. So
I'll tell you what the appropriate communication is if you're in Miami. It's a hug.
It's a hug.
You're going to get a hug. There's no fist. There is no fist bump. Yeah. Oh, well, but Julie, also there's different articles that I've been scanning. You and I talked about this. Yeah. They're worried about kids wearing masks at school and not being able to form the ability to read micro expressions from people's faces because their faces are covered. And that's something all of us take for granted. You don't even know you're doing it, but your subconscious mind is picking up the unconscious facial expressions of the person you're communicating with. And that's the reason, ultimately, if you have a problem communicating with people on the phone, calling people, if maybe you have an accent or whatever, you're going to be 1,000 times more effective if you go and look at them face to face, because subconsciously you're reading their micro expressions and they're reading yours. Maybe you can't convey your energy, enthusiasm, and maybe in real life you're a very likable person, but over the phone for some reason it just doesn't come off. Well, if you go and talk to that same person, they know they'll love you because you have that skill set. That's the thing that they're worried that's going to be lost with these sort of the masking, but also now we're talking about the social networking, especially for the younger generation.
Exactly.
A lot of the kids that are coming up today, by kids I mean 20s and whatnot, they haven't learned the skill set, and they're going to be in a disadvantage for the older generation, or even their generation, that are learning how to have direct, effective communications, that are willing to learn how to have conversation outline, aka scripted conversations, in a sales environment. Those people are going to have the unfair advantage, not the people that know how to make a really good TikTok video.
To your original point, if you have to choose, be good communicating in person.
Yep. And furthermore, if it's interesting too, if you take all this in consideration, it's very reasonable to expect, or to have the expectation rather, that people who know how to effectively communicate face-to-face or over the phone will have an enormous unfair advantage in the marketplace, not just selling, but in life in general.
For sure.
Because everyone else is so used to throwing out a gift, to express their emotions, right? Exactly. They're not used to actually using words to express their emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to hear more about this because it's being heavily studied right now.
It is fascinating.
So it really is. So, so back to our theme of communication with the social media. Typical things you must be good at to be effective communicating on social. Okay, so there's 3 mini points here to work on. First one is identify current events which are interesting and impactful to your social followers. Housing news, mortgage news, inventory trends, new construction. Provide something of value consistently. And I might throw on also maybe something entertaining. We know that people like to read about celebrity housing, for example, but things that might be affecting them. So what's happening with mortgage news and inventory trends? And what about that new construction area around the corner? Things that your followers should be caring about with regards to real estate.
I would be careful using, I don't know really how far this goes, but Julie mentioned celebrity news. Don't use copywritten pictures, for example, on Instagram.
Excellent point.
Yeah, be very, very careful of using any copywritten pictures, and you can assume any picture you find on Google News or all any of these other outlets Google Images or any of these other outlets, they're copywritten. Even though they're available there, don't think that you might not run afoul of somebody owns a copyright on that image. So do not be using scraped pictures off the internet for your social media. That will, we've had that problem happen twice. And maybe 3 times in the past, 15 years, where some contractor that was working for us used, without us knowing, a copywritten picture, and we had to end up paying some sort of settlement.
Yeah, and it was all very innocuous. You never would have thought anything about it, but it was how he went about doing it that got.
Yeah, some of the pictures you never would have. It's like, how the hell did that picture have a copyright? It's crazy. Some of the things. But anyway,
so just be careful.
Just be very careful about that, because even though if you're posting on Instagram, for example, a picture of or reposting a picture of, say, some celebrity, and that picture was originally scraped from some sort of photographer's copywritten website with their images, and you repost it, you're actually going to be liable for the use of that image for your social media.
Exactly. Okay, so next, understand all of your different tools and use them: video, pictures, GIFs, testimonials, etc. So not just static word posts, but understand all of your different tools. Next is, and I think this is really important, have an actual content strategy. Sporadic updating on random topics is not really a plan. So you've got to ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish? Some things that I jotted down, I'm sure you're going to have some thoughts on this too. What should your content strategy be? Well, lead generation would be the obvious one, but community engagement, expanding your center of influence, engaging online to engage in real life.
IRL.
As the kids say.
As the
IRL.
kids say, yes.
Yes, but what should their content strategy be? Let's say somebody wants to dabble in this. Then maybe they don't want to be a YouTube star, but they want to enhance what they're doing online. Would you add anything to that as far as their content strategy? What are they actually trying to accomplish?
Well, you're keeping this very professional, which I appreciate. The one thing I would personally add, because there are people that we follow on Instagram, and we follow them mostly because of their profession, what they do for a living, because we're interested in have this say. But the article or the content when they post something that's of more of a personal nature is always more interesting than if they're drawing on about their usual topic. And you and I are interested in a whole wide variety of things intentionally, right? We go out of our wheelhouse to physicists and all kinds of weird things just to keep our brains, elastic. And and when they post a picture of their cat eating their pencil while they're trying to write some dissertation, that's kind of fascinating.
Yes.
It's fun.
It's good to sprinkle that in and keep it real, right? You are a real person after all. Okay, so you can tell that when we screw something up on the podcast that proves that it was live, like the dog barks or something.
Or my sneezing.
Or when we're on Facebook Live and, we have whatever little glitch. People do like to see that you're dealing with real world things just like they do.
Well, if you want to drill down on what you just said, when on Instagram, the things that people consume the most of our content are just little videos that we created that are only like 15 or 20 seconds long of you and I going on a walk and
like a hermit crab rescue
mission. We saved a hermit crab. We were out driving around a couple nights ago, and it was a beautiful evening. It wasn't too hot, and we drove our golf cart around, and Julie sees this huge, what looked like an enormous rock in the road, and it wasn't. It was a hermit crab the size of her hand. This thing was huge. It was the biggest one we've ever seen before. And I'm not saying Julie has big hands, but you know what I'm saying. So we go
like a tennis ball sized hermit crab.
Yeah, it was. And so we go and rescue this guy, and we did a little video of us rescuing this guy and putting it could be a gal, I suppose. What do we know? I didn't sex the thing. All right, come here, Mr. Hermit Crab. We're going to check under the claw. Yeah, exactly. But so that was a video that people really liked.
Yeah. So for example, to keep it real and sprinkle in some personal things there. All right, so that was all point A. Point B, this was interesting. How do you get yourself unfollowed? What screws this all up? Okay. This was according to Sprout Social, who studied this and put some percentages on it. And this is of people surveyed. 51% said that they will unfollow you due to irrelevant content. So if they signed up to follow you because maybe they want to see what's going on in the real estate world and you don't post about that, or they somehow think you're irrelevant, you'll get unfollowed. 35% said too many promotional posts. To your point, don't make it all about real estate all the time. Have some hermit crab rescues if you must, for example. Okay, so this is something we've talked about a lot. 34% said too political. I actually had another category, too political or social posting, social commentary posts. People really don't want to read about that stuff, guys, and it really doesn't have a place in your business.
This pertains to actually real estate professionals. Now, if you happen to follow, if you're a political, this isn't for any of you most likely, but if you happen to be somebody who's, Ben Shapiro, for example, and you're posting political stuff, and
that's his wheelhouse, though.
And you don't post political stuff, and he's posting too many pictures of hermit crabs, he'll get unfollowed. But you guys, just remember, one of the things that Julie and I are big advocates of is being a Republic rat, right? You're both, or you're neither. But the point is, you avoid talking about politics. And the last little category of reasons that people will unfollow you, Julie?
29% said, quote, they ignored my posts, likes, or comments. This is something that you can fix today. Don't just blow off when somebody says, gosh, that was a great article. Thank you for posting that. I didn't know that. Don't say nothing. The people don't like that after a while.
Well, and that's the hard part. That's where you get into the weeds. So if you post something on, for example, Instagram, and it's something that somebody took the time to write a nice comment about or repost and all the rest of it, and if you don't overtly show appreciation for what they did because it does benefit you, then sometimes that can actually offend them to the point where they're going to unfollow you. This, again, is getting into the weeds, and you're having to decide what end of the spectrum of social media engagement you're going to have. Some of you, like I said, you're just going to go the I'm not interested in it, I'll pass on it route. Some of you are going to go, I'm going to try to become the greatest Instagram superstar. Somewhere in the middle probably is where most of you will land. And just do remember that if you're going to be successful at this, you're going to have to be very careful that you not run off the people that you've fought so hard to get to follow you. And this is really hilarious. Especially, we keep talking about Instagram because it's probably the most popular social media platform right now. Right now, could be changed tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Instagram, you can go out and buy followers. And a lot of people, agents in particular, that will brag about how many followers they have, and they'll actually use that as a listing tool. If you get into their social media, if you get into their Instagram, and you see that they have a bunch of followers from all over the world, that there's no way that agent is attracting people from Kazakhstan or whatever to talk about real estate in Peoria, Illinois. Mm-hmm. So they've bought those followers. And so what's the point? Is it just to have these bragging right numbers? Well, no. It's about having a small group, relatively small group of people that read your content, that are engaging with your content. And, imagine if you're at, for example, a Starbucks, right, or a party. And there's at some point the party's going to become so popular, it's going to be impossible for you to have any sort of even basic conversation with anyone in the room because there's going to be too many people, too much noise, too many things going on. So don't think the way you win at this, especially as a real estate professional, is to have billions of followers. Again, unless you're trying to become Logan Paul. And if you're not trying to become Logan Paul, then having a smaller, dedicated group of people that are listening to what you say and are actually engaging with what you say, people that are actually friends of yours that care about what you have to say. They could be first-degree friends, people you actually know, friends of the friends or friends of the friends of the friends. But as long as they're in the wheelhouse of your community and where you wish to sell real estate, then you're going to win because you're going to start, essentially forcing yourself into their minds as being a reliable, relevant real estate professional.
Well, one of the good byproducts of being decent at this, when you're posting a lot on your social and you're paying attention to some of these rules that we're laying out for you guys, is that when you, not if, but when you actually make those real world live calls to your past clients and centers of influence, they go so much more smoothly if you know what's been going on with them. You pay attention to what they're posting.
And likewise, too. Some of them are going to be real social media junkies, and they're going to be – when Julie and I got back from our trip around the country, the Harris U.S. tour, and a lot of you guys were following us on Instagram, we were running into people that we had to remind ourselves that we were posting like we were on Instagram in particular, and people had this unusual, I don't even know what the words are, but they knew where we were. They knew what we'd seen. They were asking us questions, and some of these people we only sort of knew. We were just sitting at a restaurant, and we started having a conversation with a really nice guy named Bill, and he was asking us about Montana. And my first thought was, how the hell do you know we're in Montana? And then I was, oh, yeah. So he must be somebody who was following us on Instagram.
And I only kind of knew him. I had to have him remind me his name, but I knew him. I knew his wife, right? And so she watches some of Zoe's stuff, and I comment on her stuff. So that was like friend in the second degree.
Right, that's the point. And so if you're really drilled down and you're in a community of, well, most of you are going to find a lot of success if you focus on a relatively large geographic area, and you're relevant in the community because you're listing and selling homes, and then they're discovering you on their social media feeds and they're starting to follow you and see you're a good contributor of content, then you're going to actually have a foot in the door, at least a mental foot, or a foot in their mental door, if you guys understand. But none of this is ever going to replace direct communication, your ability to actually sell. You could have the best social media presence ever. You could have basically had something that was just next generation social media, beautiful pictures and the rest of it. But if you don't know how to overcome objections, if you don't know how to be competitive with winning a listing, if you don't know how to essentially create a solid set of USPs for your real estate business, it's all for naught. That's the reason that Julie and I will never say anything other than this. You have to be a proactive lead generator. Part and parcel of being a proactive lead generator is learning how to sell. The word is sell. Sell is solving somebody else's problems. That's all selling is. You're solving a problem that they're willing to pay you to solve for them. That's what really, guys, that's selling is nothing more complicated than that. You're being of service to other people. That's what our coaching program is about. That's what our book is about. That's what all of our, these podcasts are about, helping you guys to learn how to sell. Once you learn how to sell, and once you're confident with how to say and how to say it, if you choose then to enhance your offline activities with online activities, aka social, that's going to make your effectiveness better, but it's not going to make it so that one day you can stop doing the offline direct communication, direct proactive prospecting, lead generation methods that we coach.
Well, so what you're saying is it's not instead of, it's not a standalone. It's in addition to make everything else that you're doing in the real world better.
Right, but it's a voluntary in addition to, because if you get really
not
good,
required, really.
It's not required, but if you get really good and effective at the offline communication, the proactive lead generation, the things we teach primarily in our coaching program. Obviously, we teach a lot about social as well. But if you get really good at that, then this stuff becomes ancillary.
Yes, becomes less relevant to you. Yes. Okay, so is this a good place to wrap, or should we do one more point?
No, this is a good place to wrap, because now we're going to get even more into the weeds. So, guys, here's what your homework from today's podcast is going to be. If you're using social media now, how are you using it? Do a little social media audit yourself and just go check to see how many people have messaged you and you actually haven't messaged them back. Decide what your level of commitment is going to be. And I'll give you essentially from today's podcast, here are your two options. Well, there are three options, but I really want you to focus on one of two. Either do nothing. Frankly, that is an option. You don't have to do, if you're, I think of Chuck Williamson. He's sold 182 houses. Maybe he'll sell like 225, maybe 230 or 40 this year. And I had to teach him how to use Facebook. He didn't even know how to log in. He just doesn't have any need for social media. He gets all of his business from direct proactive lead generation. And pretty much every major, very successful long-term realtor in the United States, that's where they get primarily their business. After a while, and when they become sort of, when they have built the reputation of being the person to go to when it comes to solving your problem, aka selling your house, then people will start calling you opposed to you calling them. But you never can stop actually doing the direct proactive lead generation. But let's just start there. You could do nothing. That's option A. Option B is you can just build basic profiles. And all a profile is opening up a Facebook business account, putting your basic information on there so then it gets indexed inside Google. You might want to do the same thing for Twitter, LinkedIn. You might want to do the same thing for Instagram. What's the other one? That one where people put up pictures of
Pinterest.
Pinterest, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So those are really the only ones that you should really focus too much on creating profiles. And then the other end of it is going to be start creating media. Now, when you get to the creation of media, we're going to talk about that. You can do it yourself. And if you're going to do it yourself, we're going to give you some suggestions, which Jolie already did, of what you can actually create. But you're going to have to do it on a schedule, and you're going to have to start working it into your daily routine. And there's secrets to how much you post or how much you don't post. There's secrets to all that stuff. Or you can hire someone to do it for you. The hired accounts are obvious, though, I have to tell you.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's always the same basic flavor of impersonal sort of, nothingness. Mm-hmm. And those are going to be, so if you're thinking, well, I'm going to do this, Tim, but I'm just going to basically give my credit card number to somebody and they're going to start pumping out all the social media content, I would suggest that you just go back to the second option, which was just creating profiles and basically keeping it so you just post now and then. Because if you start spending money to create to have someone else put up sort of statutory content that's really boring and blah.
Well, don't you stop looking at that after a while?
It's actually going to work against you.
That's my point.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you've spent money to get it to work against you.
Right, and it'll work against you because it's just going to make you seem very unoriginal,
Kinda
uncreative, and kind of lazy. Right, exactly. So those are your options from today, but we're going to get into the weeds about what else you should be talking about.
Let me rewind just a step, because one of the things that you just said was build the profiles. I have to say, please finish your profiles.
Yeah.
Actually post pictures of yourself. Actually fill out the profile questions. Where'd you go to school? That kind of stuff.
And have all the profiles be identical, too.
Exactly. Because, I mean, what do you think when we research agents all the time because they're joining our coaching program.
Or they're joining our EXP group.
Exactly. So you Google them, find out, who is this person I'm about to call? And you get one of those shadow profiles. And there's like one sentence. And then you look at the last time they posted it, it was like 2019. Doesn't that kind of make you think, well, I don't know how active this person really is. Like, you're not really giving me anything. You might as well not have had a profile at all.
So let me tell you about that, because I've thought about that too.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of major influential, I don't know, we can call them influencers, we can call them leaders, we can call them whatever they are, that have social profiles, but post like 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And I can think of people that I follow, that you follow, that just for, famous authors and things like that, they hardly ever post because they don't want to participate in it.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. All I'm saying is if you're going to try to get something out of those platforms, to not just kind of dabble with it. If you're going to do profiles, make your profiles mean something.
All a profile is basically a setting up like your name is going to the directory, to use old school language, right? That's all it is. Your name, your phone numbers, use the same phone number, use the same name, use the same forms of communication, make everything very, very consistent. And yeah, that's pretty much, if that's the baseline of what you're going to do, that's what we would do. This, really at the end of the day, again, social media is something that's designed to be social, right? And that implies that it's not real work, aka social, opposed to say work media. Yeah. So just keep that in mind.
I don't think that would survive if you actually called it work media.
No, it wouldn't. And good. And something else that's kind of worth mentioning, just because of all the political hoo-ha and brouhaha and silliness. Social media is not good or bad. There's no intrinsic good or bad. It's not malevolent. There's nothing inherently
baked into it.
It's how you use it, and it's what you choose to consume from it. And they talk about all these sort of, mystical algorithms that are somehow reading your mind and brainwashing you into believing all this insidious horriblenesses about blah, 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 blah. None of it's true. If you get something on any of your social media feeds that you don't like, unfollow the person who posted it, and or just tell the algorithm by saying no more of content like this. And it doesn't take but maybe 2 or 3 notifications or interacting with it for it to stop actually sending you posts like that. So if you're getting a bunch of garbage, it's probably because you're looking for a bunch of garbage and reading a bunch of garbage. So don't be manipulated into thinking that social media is intrinsically bad. It's not. It is essentially a very effective communication tool.
Well, it's no different than, how many cable channels do people have now? 800? Yeah. And you're flipping through and you see something you don't want to see. You don't go back to that channel, right? You skip it, you delete it, you decide not to follow that. It's just a different type of media.
It was pretty funny, I have to say, though. And now I hope we're not saying political, because we're breaking one of our own rules if we are. But it was pretty funny, Julie, on that 60 Minutes thing with the 60 Minutes whistleblower about Facebook, how she was saying how they create subject lines and titles that are intentionally designed for you to click, and the algorithms give preference. When it sees a bunch of people clicking on titles that are particularly salacious, it's going to give people more of that, and it's going to incentivize the system and people, more content creators, to create more blah, 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 blah. And it's like, isn't that exactly what cable news has been doing like forever?
Well, how about even before that? How about newspapers?
Exactly. I mean,
it's just another form of media. That's it.
Yeah, but it's so hilarious to see people like, oh my gosh.
Conspiracy theories.
They're newspaper. Guys, trust me, none of this stuff is new. This is essentially a battle between old media and new media. Don't participate in it. Just see it for what it is. Use it for however you want to use it. For many of you, it's going to be an enhancement to what you're doing, or what you should be doing, which is proactive lead generation. It's certainly not going to be a replacement. By the way, we do have available, I think, 17 or 18 free coaching calls spots available this week. If you want one with one of our new member coaches, just coach the word Harris, Harr. Well, it's the name. Text the name Harris to 47372. Text the name Harris to 47372. And you will not only get an opportunity to speak with one of our new member coaches, but you're also going to be available, or you're also going to get a download of our real estate treasure map, which is our fill-in-the-blank business plan, which is definitely something all of you guys should be completing in fourth quarter of this year in preparation for next year. In the meantime, we want to thank you for continuing to make this the #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate agents in the world. Oh, by the way, we are now #1 in education in Barbados.
Hey, cool. A neighboring island.
It's funny when you look in the stats, you could see where you rank, because we're in the education section, which is incredibly competitive. But to see where we are numerically in the education, like sometimes in the United States, we're like number 33, of all podcasts in education. And sometimes we're like 247. But in some of these countries where there's probably
saturated with it.
Where there's probably like 14 people that listen to podcasts, we're like always number one. So we're #1 in all corners of the world when it comes to education.
Shout out to Barbados.
Yeah, shout out to Barbados. That's right. We certainly appreciate it. You guys have a fantastic day, and we'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.